Hello, everybody. My name is Yasuki Yang, and welcome to my podcast. I have here Professor Dan Demetriou. Dan, do you want to, Professor, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dan Demetriou. I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of Minnesota Morris.
Okay. Professor, we are here to talk about honor. Um, but first, why is honor such a mysterious thing? Like, if I seek to be an honorable man, what am I seeking? So, two questions. Why is it so? It's like foreign almost, right? And what am I looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when people, like if someone said, well, be just, make sure you're just in
Yeah,
all your dealings, that would also confuse us because we would say, well, okay, but what does it mean to be just? So part of the problem with trying to be an honorable person is just the abstractness of it, right? Justice is very abstract, honor is very abstract, and so it has that problem. I think honor is actually even more difficult to flesh out than justice is because it connotes wildly different things. It connotes wildly different types of person. Um, on the one hand, it connotes like somebody who is status seeking, very
yep,
selfish, and obsessed with prestige and so forth. And on the other hand, it also connotes to some ears someone who's the complete opposite of that, who doesn't who doesn't seek
yeah,
status, who just tries to do the right thing even though he's not being rewarded for it at all, and just is a very dutiful person. So that's a mysterious thing about honor. And there are some other problems about honor that really worry people, like what it means to be an honorable woman. It's kind of
yeah,
gendered in a way. Justice is not. Like if I say Jill's just, Jack's just, you kind of probably think they're just in the same way. Whereas if I say Jill's an honorable woman and Jack's an honorable man, it in to many people's ears means different things. So those are some of the traditional issues that have beset people for thousands of years, trying to get their hands around arms around what honor means. And I think I've made a little progress towards that question, but um, um, we could talk more about that. I think the core idea of honor is indeed prestige.
right. Because it has to be. It's a social phenomenon. So, without the socialness of it, you can't really have honor, right? So
I
you
think that's
gave
right. Yeah,
right,
like
yeah,
even, but it could be idealized. So what you often get with people with a very developed sense of honor is
right, yeah,
they're not so concerned about impressing people in the real world. They will often have a sort of imaginary honor group, or it's
oh,
maybe
okay,
their ancestors, or maybe their heroes,
okay,
or whatever, and saying, or the bros, I did it for my bros or whatever. Right.
yeah,
um where you're like, well, this won't get me a lot of prestige among people in the world, or people I don't really have much respect for, but I'm doing the type of thing that would get prestige among the people that I truly respect. That's so it
right,
does seem to have this very stubborn aspect of sociality to it, as you point out. But it
yeah,
could be that society could be highly idealized.
okay. How does it differ from pride? Like, pride is like it's like you're a peacock, right? Like, look at
Mhm.
me, I'm so good. I mean, look at me, right? And so, how does to be honorable in a sense is like to be prideful, but yet not maybe like one necessary condition, but not entirely. So how does that differ from pride?
Yeah, pride is a big motivator of the honorable, and Socrates knew this. Plato represents this in his tripartite nature of the soul. If you
Yeah.
recall that Plato felt that there's kind of like three major divisions of human psychology, and there's three major divisions in an ideal state. And the lowest of these is the appetites,
Yeah.
or the merchant and workers and business people in a society. But anyway, the appetites, and these are um, driven by kind of desire. All right, and then you have the highest part of man, according to Plato, which is sort of the reason. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's motivated by truth and wisdom and those sorts of things. But the middle part, which is the least understood, and our society has done a lot to eradicate this part, is the thumos. There's really, I don't know if there's an English equivalent. The closest would be the word spiritedness, but it, which he said, well, if you're thinking about the body, the reason, as it were, is in your head, and the appetites are around your loins, your hunger, your lustfulness. But the thumos is a chest, is located in the chest, and that is the part of you that is motivated by pride, a desire for honor, and so forth. And yeah, now I'm not an expert on pride. A lot of good stuff has been written on pride, but like, just what anyone's going to say is there could be improper pride, overweening pride, hubris, and then there could be proper pride, and there could be a desire for pride that's okay, where you um, want to have a, a justifiable self-esteem,
Right.
justifiable
Right.
self-esteem.
Okay. Sure. And what about respect? Because, like, how would I define respect? Respect is like the acknowledgement of somebody's worth, right? So basically, if I'm disrespected, let's say I meet you at a party, and then you and I make eye contact, so I know you, right? And then you just ignore me. I go, okay, well, I feel disrespected because you didn't acknowledge my worth. And to respect me would be, or if I were to respect you, I would come up to you and shake your hand, right? And just be like, hey, I don't want to talk long, but I want to acknowledge your existence. I'm kind of respecting you. And yet it seems like I'm getting hints of respect with honor, right? You're kind of respecting each other as equals. So um, how does respect and honor relate, I guess?
Yeah, that's very complicated too, um and I don't necessarily love all the ways philosophers have talked about respect. But one, you could think about respect as sort of the the behaviors that you do that properly acknowledge or respond appropriately to what you are. And here we have a bunch of moralistic calls you have to make, like, well, wait a minute, are we all equals, and we're all, if that's the case, then I should give you that sort of respect. In a more aristocratic society, maybe they're not going to think that we're all equals. They're going to say, no, I'm not trying to get I don't want the respect of an equal from somebody who is actually not my equal. I want forms of respect that acknowledge that I'm better than them or worse than them,
Okay,
you know.
right, right,
And I don't want to be shown more respect than I deserve. And I
right.
don't want to be shown less respect than I deserve. And so okay.
Like,
And but there's all sorts of things going on.
yeah,
There's the type of respect that that, like, if we're on a committee, then you have to show me certain sorts of courtesies as part of the committee, even though I'm not Um, I don't have the same status as you outside the committee,
Yeah.
right? So there's all sorts of um, uh,
Problems and issues or
all sorts of things you have to adjust for. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so I know you gave some definitions of honor. You have prestige, honor as onistas, agonistic honor, and cultures of honor. Um, Maybe you could talk about that real
yeah,
quick. Yeah, define
right.
those.
So if I were to try, I have a couple encyclopedia entries on honor where I try to lay out my analysis of honor. And I say, well, look, you have to understand this core difference in ethics, which is between what's good or an act, what has value axiologically, and the right. Okay, which which are considerations about correct behavior.
Yeah,
All right.
right, right. Yeah.
So a simplistic way of thinking about this that's useful is, um, hey, candy is good, right?
Yeah.
It's like a good, and then there's this interesting question about the right, which is who should get candy and how much candy, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, or money is good, but then there's this interesting question about who should get money and how much should they get? How should we distribute those goodies? Okay, so to the honor mindset, prestige is the goodie. And then there's these different philosophies about how to correctly go about getting prestige, how who should get more prestige than others, etc. Okay, so and so that is why in some senses of the word honor, it literally just means prestige. It's just a synonym for prestige. Oh, you gave me much honor by, you know, meeting me here at this, when it was inconvenient, or giving me this award. You've given me these honors, right? So to some degree, honor just means prestige. But other senses of honor are views about how morally, what the moral constraints are on prestige. So one of these, which I call honor as honestus, this Latin word, is coming from the Stoical tradition, and is also kind of popular among Christians who talk about honor. It's kind of a bourgeoisie sense of honor, and it is um, it is the honor of the uh, honest dude. All right, so like just a diligent guy who puts his head down. His word is his bond. He does what he says he's going to do. He is very stoical. So to some degree, this is like, you see shades of this.
Integrity.
Yeah, a man of integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's this type of guy. All right, who quietly does the work that needs to be done and doesn't seek glory for it. Who can be relied upon. Who doesn't cheat on his wife when he goes on trips. This sort of of hero, this sort of building block of society. All right, and yeah, so there's that type of honorable person. Then there's another type of person that's very different. This is the cavalier. This is the aristocrat. This is the person who seeks glory, and seeks fame, is hungry for fame, and can't isn't necessarily very reliable. Okay, so whereas a good
Okay.
soldier is like the
Yeah.
first type, a good soldier, who just
Yeah.
faces down his fears and risks his life
Yeah.
and so forth. The second type of person is more the warrior or the warrior aristocrat, who very much seeks to decorate himself and to distinguish himself in battle, probably one-on-one battle where everyone's watching. He's not really reliable like an Achilles. Achilles is not a reliable fighter. Okay, if he's not getting the glory that he thinks he should get, if he feels disrespected, he just stops and lets a bunch of his comrades die. Okay, right. So you have that type, and this type of honor sees honorableness as not cheating in those competitions for prestige. Okay, but this type of person is not good in authority structures, whereas the first person is. Then you have the third type, which is the type of honorable man in what social science calls the cultures of honor, which is a term of art, you might say. And these are cultures that are often kind of lawless. So you'll see them in the inner city. You'll see them in highlands around the world. Why?
Yeah.
Because those are places away from the plains where the big cities are, where law and order is enforced. Okay. So people are kind of on their own. And you also see these in pastoralist cultures, again, where you are a man, maybe just a few men guarding your herds far away from everybody else. And the hypothesis from social science, people like Richard Nesbitt and Dov Cohen, is and for a while I didn't like their view, but I've come around to it. But I didn't like their view because they were trying to account for all of honor, and I knew that there were some things that their view couldn't account for. And I was also trying to give a unified theory of honor, and so my view of agonism couldn't account for their stuff. So I've just become a person that just splits these up. But anyway, their view was that this type of person has a certain sort of recognizable profile across cultures, whether you're talking about East Africa, whether you're talking about the Scottish Highlands, whether you're talking about Central Asia or wherever. And those are kind of hotspots for this, these pastoralist backwoods cultures. And they're very prickly. They're very easy to insult, and they're ready to fight at the drop of a hat over any sort of insult. Okay, you also see this in the American inner city. Again, because that's also a place where that's kind of lawless. And so their idea is that these are places that highly prize masculinity, highly prize violent responses to insult. And this makes sense. This makes sense as a survival strategy because if I don't present as tough and ready to die, if you even slightly aggress upon me, then I am signaling a sort of victim status, right? I'm signaling that I am an easy mark for you. So you as a predator will mess with somebody who's weaker. Okay. And so something they don't talk as much about, and I don't think they're good at this, is that these same sort of cultures even encourage you to be so you are very on guard against people stealing your stuff or insulting you, but you are kind of prepared to insult other people and steal their stuff. And so it's a very interesting dynamic.
It's a defensive.
Yeah,
it
so
sounds
it's
like a
not just
defensive
defensive, it's
aggression.
also offensive,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So this, and this type of honor is super gendered because this is a very masculine mode. What they're describing, it doesn't do a good job of describing what feminine honor is like. But of course, what feminine honor in these cultures are going to be having lots of children and sexual chastity. And so those are the markers of honor for women in those cultures, which again, you could see why that would make sense. These guys are away fighting or away with their animals herding. And so they're away from their women a lot. They're not like agriculturalists that are around their wives all day long. So they can't mate guard. So what they have to do is set up these societies that really pen their women in sexually, okay, so that the women don't fool around while the guys are gone. To the point where at the very extremes, like East Africa, they engage in female genital mutilation, which,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
right,
Hmm.
has
Hmm.
it's now there seems to be consensus building in the social sciences that the ultimate cause of the real explanation for female genital mutilation. I mean, approximately they think, okay, well, look, it's attractive, it looks clean, whatever, right? It's become aesthetic to them. But the real explanation for this having uptake as a cultural meme is that it simply somewhat reduces to very much reduces pleasure in sex, maybe
Okay.
to the point of even making it painful. So if sex is painful or not that enjoyable to women, that dramatically increases that your woman will be faithful to you while you're gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So regarding regarding the culture of honor type, why would it's like a little bit why would women act like that, like super masculine or super like willing to fight you and willing to like just like act like a man in a culture of honor setting? Because I know some women who are easy. They will fight you. They want to fight you. They're easy to maybe like stress or like um quibble with, right? Why would it like, because women are in this setting, women are supposed to be, well, as you say, like making babies or just virgins, but and yet some women are just super, they're like a culture of man or culture of honor man. So do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't really thought about that much. I guess my first pass at answering it would be that sometimes these cultures are extremely masculinized, such that even though they have kind of different ethics for women and men, one way a woman could be a good woman is being kind of like a man.
Yeah.
And so you do
Okay.
sometimes
Okay.
get, like Spartan women who, although they didn't fight, they were supposed to be tough, and would shave their
Yeah.
head and so forth, when at least when they were young. And you have um, Viking shield maidens and so forth. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And we see some of this in the Black community now, which is a far, in the Black inner city, which is, a kind of very dysfunctional, I would say, form of culture of honor, where
Yeah.
you have Black women actually committing murder at a rate per capita higher than white men, which I think is one of the most fascinating statistics around. And you see all these videos of Black women getting in fights, Black groups of Black women getting in fights, and I don't think it's just selective. I don't think there are as many of these occurrences going on in other communities. So yeah, there's like this. So maybe it's that the overall culture is masculinized to the point where women start imitating masculine norms on a whole different level, not woman versus woman as much as women versus other women, and in their own certain ways. And
Yeah.
also, I think to some degree, what you're looking at in the dysfunctional inner city is just a breakdown of of it's sort of a lot of traumatized women, okay, with very
Right.
serious mental issues that are dealing with problems in ways that they feel like they have to because the men aren't, and there's no sort of masculine or, there's no order being imposed by masculine responsibility. And so, they're all their examples of masculine agency, or agency at all, are, instances of people lashing out and fighting on the streets. So they do.
Hmm.
It's a sad thing to see.
Yeah, so I dated this girl, and mental illness. All our friends were all mentally ill. Drug use, gang activity, the wildest things. And one thing that was strange was like she referred to like super polygamous, or like super like serial dating kind of type of thing. And she was just like everybody, like, I mean, like, no fathers pretty much, but also like they just did not take relationships seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
um
So in social
like,
sciences, this is
yeah.
called fast life history strategy, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Right, yeah.
this. So it's like, there's like two strategies that you can have towards life. One is a slow strategy where you take a long time to develop. You start having sex late. You have sex with few or one sex partners. You
Yeah,
have a few children and you devote a lot of resources to those children. You delay gratification in all sorts of dimensions of life. You get
yep,
a good education. You get a lot of money and so forth. So that's slow life strategy. And
yeah,
then fast life history strategy is you mature quickly. You have sex with a lot of partners. You have more babies. You the type, and in the case of women, what goes on is they even like start menstruating earlier. They The type of men they prefer are more violent and dangerous, and the reason for that, okay, is because they're looking for protection. So the big reason that they're sexual early is because they don't have a father, they don't have a male,
yeah,
powerful male to protect them. So in the sense of their a father. So what they do is they look
yeah,
for
yeah,
another powerful male to protect them, in the sense of a sex partner who will probably have a harem. Right, he's going to be as big and violent a guy as possible, who will probably have a harem, but at least she'll be
yeah.
secure under his harem. And yeah, so it's a whole crazy
It's sad. I mean,
way
or
of existing that shouldn't exist in a first world country, but we've allowed it to happen. So
yeah. And like, well, the strange thing is that she referred to her like the guys as like bitches, right? So like basically she was acting like like acting like a guy, but also like she thinks she's a guy in a way where and it's kind of um it was wild. But okay, so honor. So which one is superior? Does that make sense? So like
mm,
honor as onistas, agonistic honor, cultures of honor, because they're all different, and um
yeah, that's a good
yet they
question.
exist, right?
Yep.
So like which is better over the others? I know you're a fan of agonistic honor, but why are you a fan of agonistic honor?
I think
And how does
agonistic,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know that any is better. They each probably have their place. Um, I mean, if you are in tough circumstances, you should probably adopt this culture of honor, strategy. And
Yeah.
uh, if you are in an orderly place, then the other two are better strategies. So and they have their place. It is we should give honor to responsible, dutiful men and women, um, even if they don't seek it themselves. But these are paradigms that we should extol and teach our kids to be like, to some degree. Okay, but
Yeah.
on the other hand, we don't want to break their spirit or make them boring. We do. There's there's there are good things about nurturing ambition, because what this desire for ambition, this desire to rise up the ranks is good. Because what it does is, like, suppose you're a very talented musician. Well, if you're not ambitious, you your light won't shine as brightly as it could for society. Your talents won't
Yeah.
benefit society as much as they would as if you were ambitious. Because if you're ambitious, then you're going to say, okay, well, I want to go to the city, or I want to be in this better orchestra, or whatever. And through competitions, hopefully fair competitions for the orchestra or whatever, you move on and up into the place where more and more people could see you, and because you've achieved a higher place in this ranking. Okay, and so it's good.
Yeah.
And you don't want the ranking. In my opinion, you don't. There's a ranking that we have, whether it's athletes or musicians or artists or academics or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And we want that ranking because, like, I mean, here's a silly example I give, but suppose that suppose America is at war, and with Nazi Germany or whatever, and
Yeah.
and the president's like, hey, I want to have our best minds, our best physics minds, working on some super weapons that I can't even imagine, so we could defeat our enemy. Well, how are you going to find out who the best minds are if there's not some ranking system in place, right?
Yeah.
Like Ivy League schools or whatever, right? But there was a ranking system in place, so they were able to just get on the phone and know, okay, who the top physicists were, so they could get them in, the Manhattan Project or whatever. But if we had
Yeah.
some weird sort of egalitarian culture where it was just like some lottery system where, Oppenheimer or whoever, or Einstein, could be assigned to, community college or something like that,
Yeah.
then society would not be able to access top talent when they needed to. But additionally, it's just good to know, where you fall, and for many social reasons. And so if you're not ambitious, you're distorting the ranking. And if you're too ambitious and you cheat to get a higher ranking than you deserve,
Yeah.
that also distorts the system, right? Through, like,
Yeah.
patronage or corruption or something like that. So we want we want orderly, fair rankings that distribute honor to the people according to their merit, as determined through fair competition for status. That's what agonism is really socially useful for. So it has its place too, and I'm glad that we have it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to war, I have published in defense of maintaining a bit of agonistic ethos even in today's war fighters. So it isn't very obvious to me that the modern war fighter should be only thinking about honor in terms of what I've called, honor as honestus, um, but also more in terms of the warrior.
Yeah. So you write that honor is contradictory, which I understand, because you write that at the Battle of Copenhagen, Nelson put his telescope to his blind eye, so he could not see the signals from his commander, ordering him to refuse battle. And so you have this thing where it's like duty is honor, and yet high prestige is honor because he wants to fight fairly. So what's going on here? Or you have like I think Agamemnon and Achilles, where I think the issue was Achilles, he something happened, and then Achilles was like, I wanted to fight. Or why don't you explain?
Yeah,
There's this contradictory,
Achilles is insulted by
nature.
his by the war leader Agamemnon, who takes his war bride, as it were.
Yeah. Yep.
or basically like a concubine, and he's insulted by that treatment, and so he just goes back and sits in his tents. So, and the Greeks are sort of killed in droves by the Trojans when this happens. And he's only
Right.
spurred out of this when Patroclus, feeling his best bro, Patroclus feels pity for the Greek forces and joins the fight in Achilles' armor. And then Hector kills him, and thinking it was Achilles. And then Achilles gets pissed and then goes out and starts, just
Yeah.
mowing Trojans down. And yeah, so the case of Nelson, I love that Nelson quote. If it be, what is it? If it be a sin to covet honor, I'm the most offending soul alive. I
Yeah.
love
Right.
that
Yeah.
quote, right? So
Okay.
covetous of honor, right? So it's clearly not something that a good, stoical mensch, as they would say in the Jewish tradition, would say, right? But something he was unapologetic about because he was in that, warrior aristocrat tradition.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are contradictory.
Yeah. And so, how can honor be? I guess it's like, how can honor be contradictory?
Yeah,
Because
so honor, nothing is
it sounds,
contradictory.
weird,
Yeah,
right?
nothing is
Right.
contradictory. But
Exactly.
why are both of those radically different ways of approaching the world identified, or under the umbrella of honor? And my best guess is that they're two philosophies of distributing prestige, and prestige is also called honor. So it's they're sort of
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
non-accidental homonyms. Like an accidental homonym is like bank and bank, like a bank that you put money in and a bank on a river.
Yeah.
But these are non-accidental homonyms. They're called by the same name, even though they're different things, because there is actually a connection between the two, and that connection is that they're different philosophies of
Yeah.
distributing
Okay. I
honor,
see.
or honor
Okay.
as
Makes sense.
prestige.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, agonists are naturally in conflict with authoritarian command structures. And so,
Yep.
you have Nelson, but you also have, I think you used, was it President Lincoln and George W. Bush, where Lincoln gave an address or a speech somewhere, and then his Lyceum of Springfield speech, I think you wrote that, basically just rule of law, obey the law, authoritarian systems, and but George W. Bush was, well, I mean, basically there's a problem there between authoritarian systems and agonism, I guess.
I don't
Prestige.
remember what I was. I don't remember. You've read that. It was like over a decade ago that
It
I
was
wrote
like
that.
10 years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Sorry about that.
but, yeah. So, um, there's two really important types of ranks that ethicists don't talk about. We really need to talk about this. Social science needs to talk about this, right?
Hmm.
Because I don't think they have a very clear conception of this. But there's two very different types of rankings, and maybe more, but there's at least these two. The first type we could call an authority ranking, and that's a ranking where the higher up you are in the ranking, the more authority you have. So, for instance, a captain is over lieutenants, colonels are over captains,
Yeah, yeah,
generals are over colonels. They
yeah,
boss them around. Okay,
yeah,
so, the orders go down, loyalty goes up, obedience goes up, right?
yeah.
And
Subordination. Yeah,
the people from on top, they're not doing it necessarily for their sake, right? They're doing it for the good of the whole. But okay, so there's this command structure
yep,
type ranking. And then there's another type of ranking. The most obvious example is like, football rankings. We're in college football season, right? And you have the top 25 college football teams, and they're constantly being ranked, and they're ranked by the way they compete with each other, right? So, Alabama or Ohio State will probably be near the top, and then, or Michigan or Clemson or something will be near the top. And then you have some schools that are, probably more towards the middle, like, University of Wisconsin or whatever,
Yep.
UCLA, and then some that are, you know, like Oregon State or something like that at the bottom. And 25, these are still elite, but they're out of the 25. And it isn't like if Alabama, it isn't like the Alabama football team has any power whatsoever over, okay,
Yeah. Right.
a Florida State team if they're higher ranked. They can't tell them what to do. There's no,
Yep.
they're not out there to help or order or, guide Florida State or anything like that. They're just better. It's just a ranking of excellence. Okay. And you have to think about which sort of ranking you're in to think about what the moral behavior is within, for me to do, right? So
Yeah.
so somebody is above me. How should I treat them? Well, if I'm in a authority ranking or a power ranking, then I should, I have a prima facie obligation to do what they say and give
Yeah.
them obedience, right? But if I'm in a status ranking, or then I have no and if anything, I should be challenging them. Like if they're slightly above me, I should be challenging them if I think, because it's my job to keep challenging up as much as I can to find where I could win no more. Right. So
Yeah.
if I'm ranked 25th and I challenge number 25 and beat him, good. Now I'm number 24. And then I challenge number 23. And I keep doing this until, say, I get to number 10 and number 10 beats me. Okay. I lick my wounds. I try to beat number 10 again. Number 10 beats me. Okay. Then I belong at rank 11. Like that's where I'm at. I finally
Yeah.
found my place. And meanwhile, 12 is challenging me. And I have to accept challenges from 12, right? I can't say, oh, I like my
Yeah.
position at 11 because I don't want to give up my position at 11. No, 12 has a right to challenge me. So
Is it forever? Like
forever, right?
forever until the day you die?
Yeah, you're
Like
you mean do you continue
yeah.
these
Yeah.
these? No, there is retirement. Yeah, you retire from an
Okay.
honor game. Yep. And you may enter different honor games, or you may be in multiple honor games at the same time. But I mean, this is the logic of it, right? So I even in my work give names of these principles, right? So rank ambition is the obligation that you have to try to challenge those slightly above you. But then there's
Yeah.
another rule that says, you can't be presumptuous. You can't try to challenge those of too high above you. And another rule says that I call no ducking. That's from, boxing or whatever, but you can't deny somebody just below you a challenge, right? Because that's their right. That's their right to challenge you to your spot, right? But you may deny somebody who's far below you their request to challenge because they haven't earned the right to challenge you yet. They're being presumptuous.
Right.
Yeah, but all of
Right.
this
And
would be
that's
horrific. All this would be horrific, like in a military structure, right? You wouldn't want this. You wouldn't want, privates challenging sergeants or sergeants, challenging captains or anything like that. That'd be utter
yeah.
chaos, right? Because that's a different
Yeah.
type of structure for a different type of ranking for a whole different type of purpose. Okay, so um, so the ethics of navigating those structures is very different. I can rise up the ranking in a power structure, but I have to be promoted, right? So I
Yeah.
cannot, as a colonel, say I challenge a general to his spot, which I think is kind of what they do in
Yeah.
Klingon in the Klingon mythos. But no, no, no. What happens is the generals among themselves or someone above them decides that I, as a colonel, have distinguished myself, that I should be promoted, right? So that's how you move up the ranking in the authoritarian world, but
Okay.
not the
Sure.
agonistic world. You can't be promoted. That would just be horrifically corrupt. You have
Yeah.
to fight your way up.
Yeah. And so what is considered dishonorable in an agonistic world? It's cheating or just um, not dealing with competition, I guess. But then in a authoritarian system or honor agonistas, I guess it's like disobeying your command, your duty, right? So,
Mhm. Right.
so I guess like
Right.
agonism is like merit based, and so if you didn't do the work to deserve the position, and that's dishonorable, right?
Well, I more than doing the work. If you didn't defeat in fair, respectful combat,
Oh,
or
right, right,
fair,
right,
sort
exactly.
of fair, respectful competition, um,
Yeah, right.
yeah, you don't deserve it.
Yeah, and so like is acquiring let's say your dad was rich and then he passed his money to you, is that dishonorable?
I don't think so, unless you're in some sort of honor competition over how much money you have,
Okay, so
right? So
it may just
I
not be
don't know
a
if there's
matter
any
of
such competition. We could certainly imagine it. We could certainly imagine a culture in which they wanted to compete over who had more money. But
yeah,
for
right.
sure, such a culture, if they were guided by agonistic norms, would make rules about how how you get your money, and inheriting it would just be like probably excluded, right? Because that, I mean, that money wouldn't
Okay,
count,
yeah, yeah.
So
Okay. Sure. Is men fighting women honorable, right?
yeah, this is
Because
interesting.
is it like a fair play issue right there,
Yeah,
right?
you're right. So you see in the like liberal tradition that doesn't want to understand how honor works, right? They work in a
Yeah.
very kind of legalistic, individualistic, and cooperation based ethic. Um, and the liberal tradition, hey, it doesn't matter whether a woman hit you or a man hit you, it's assault. So a good liberal is going to say, a wife hitting her husband is just as bad as the husband hitting his wife.
Yeah.
Sure, there could be some differences in strength and how much it hurts, but that is what matters. It isn't the fact that he's a man and she's a woman. Okay. Um, and they're going to say, that it's even if I'm not, even if even if the woman isn't really hurting you too much, it's still assault, and assault is serious or whatever.
Right.
Whereas, um, yeah, in a more sort of basic honor culture, um, it depends. Like in the way the West was, a woman hitting a man is laughed off. It's not considered serious, but a man hitting a woman is considered serious. Um, However, there are many cultures in which, but that's sort of like a kind of more Northwest European, again, sort of Whiggish um, sense of that a man doesn't hit a woman, because in a lot of traditional societies, men can hit women. Um, in much the same by much the same rationale that a man can or a parent can spank a child.
Yeah.
So why is this? Because they didn't have a sense of fair fight? No, it's because they don't conceive of a parent hitting their child as a competition. So it's not like it's the same sort of guy who would never go out on the street and punch um, a little person or start a fight with a little person, because that's not a fair fight. But spanking your kid or hitting your kid, they're processing that as not agonistic, not competitive, but under an authority um, context. So you're just correcting.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that type of guy might hit his wife also because they may view, I'm not defending any of this. I'm just saying they may have a certain sort of patriarchal culture that says, just as a man or woman might correct a child, a man has to correct the wife. And sometimes that's going to be physical. They're not conceiving it as a fight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
I mean, that's the
So like,
logic of it, right? I'm not
yeah.
defending the morality of it because
Right.
you
Yeah.
might say, well, that's just
Yeah.
whatever.
I guess I was thinking more of like a UFC fight where, men versus women. Some might say it's unfair, right? And so maybe there's no honor there.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
but
And that's why people are in an uproar about, what happened in the Olympics this summer where two
yeah.
um, um, people with two intersex males basically competed and I think won gold medals in women's boxing.
Yeah, so I guess some people might have intuitions about the wrongness of it, but I don't know. Maybe that's a maybe that's a different question, right? It's like these internal, maybe evolutionary intuitions about the unfairness of men versus women. But
Yeah, men
yeah,
don't like there's research on this. Men don't like really competing against women. Men like competing against men, but men don't. Men get really squirrely about competing against
yeah,
women.
it's weird. I mean, I don't know. It just feels to me. It just feels. I haven't thought about it too much, but it feels awkward.
It
It's just
does. It
weird
does
or
because
wrong, right?
there's so many things going on there. I mean, on one surface level, you feel like you're always holding back, you're
Right.
playing
The
down,
sex involved, right? It's
and another level is that women, men feel like women don't respond the same way as men do if they're beaten in a competition. So men are just sort of programmed to engage with women in a different way than competition. And importantly, men are programmed to compete with men for women. Like, right, I'm not right. It's like it's not clear that any woman is going to like me if I outcompete another woman on anything. And so, you know, um, so it's just it. Yeah, I mean, I 100% get it.
yeah.
Even if
So
women are better and or are just perfectly fine at whatever the
yeah,
competition is, men just tend not to like competing with women.
yeah, right. No, I get it. So how about honor amongst enemies? Why is that a case? So like the Israeli Palestine conflict, both sides hate each other, except you might say, there might be honorable warfare between the two, but it seems extremely hard for there to be honorable warfare when there's the October 8th Gaza, was it the Gaza incident? They have a history. They both hate each other. So why would you have honorable warfare? I guess amongst your enemies.
Yeah, that's a deep question, and I think it's good to have it if you can. What it requires is some agreement between the antagonists about what is and what isn't the rules. But you need more than that. You need some sort of uh, sense of esteem for the fighters on the other side for it to be honorable warfare. And so, how do you get that when you hate the other side?
Yeah.
Um, well, I have a story about this, right? Like, so I I kind of tried to do for honor what Hobbes did for justice in a paper about civil discourse, and I think it's called Fighting Together. And I give a Hobbesian parallel to what Hobbes says about justice, about how justice could be created. And it's like a 4-step process. So suppose you have two groups that hate each other, that I mean really hate each other, the reds and the blues. They're at war, and if like you and I are on the blues and we're fighting the reds, we hate those reds. And you do a
Yeah.
good job. You kill more reds than I do one day. You come back with 10 red scalps, and I came back with only 2 red scalps. And we're all watching you walk back from the battle with 10 red scalps. We are really going to be impressed with you, right? So step 1 is this honor among us, honor among our side. We elevate
Yeah.
you up because you're better at killing reds than the rest of us. Okay. And then the next step is we start looking at the scalps you're taking, and suppose the scalps that you're bringing back are like from the weakest reds, like the smallest, scrawniest reds, right?
Yeah.
But I'm getting only 2 scalps a day, but they're from like elite, really strong reds, because they're doing the same thing on their side, right? And it's like, then we're going to start adjusting for that. So what we start doing is we look across the battlefield, and we don't only rank ourselves, but we rank those on the other side. Who's the better killers
Oh, I
of
see. Okay.
blues,
Yeah.
right? So we start doing the same thing. We look across the battlefield and say, oh, that guy's really dangerous. That guy's not so dangerous. Okay. So we create a ranking of them. All right. So a scalp from a higher ranked red counts for more than a scalp or 2 scalps or more from a lower ranked red. All right. So we start doing that. Notice that this step is important, because what that second step does is it starts as it were giving more prestige to an enemy. We still hate their guts. We don't like them, but we at least grant that some are better than others. Some are more dangerous than others, right? Okay. The next step is that you, as somebody who's interested to maintain your high rank among us blues, you start reaching out for combat, to arrange combat with other high ranking reds, right? With high ranking reds, so you can fight them. All right. So you don't get, and there's lots of advantages to this, right? One is that you could kind of be brought down by some dumb accident, by fighting a low ranked blue that doesn't give a low ranked red that doesn't give you any honor, etc.
Yeah.
So you and your peers across start organizing, pairing off, okay, against each other. And that's really the way to elevate your rank, because you just aren't going to get it by continually beating scrubs. This is the same thing that happens in college football, right? Okay, you start off like, I mean, like if you're Ohio State, you maybe warm up with Youngstown State or Marshall or whatever, but you're never going to get in the top 25 by beating those types of schools, right? To get into the championship or the playoffs, you have to beat other top universities, right? University programs. And so the
Yeah.
coaches are talking amongst themselves and arranging dates to compete and so forth, years in advance. Okay. And then so now you have the two sides talking. You have the two sets of warriors talking across the field to each other, right? And as they develop these relationships and continue to establish these rules amongst themselves, not just like what day are we going to fight, but what time of day, we're on the battlefield, what sort of weapons are you going to bring, etc., right? And so what you have is more and more formalized warfare between the two sides, more and more communication between the two sides, more and more trust building between you as an elite blue and them and your counterparts as elite reds. you develop these forms of courtesy, etc. Right? So now you have honorable courtesies starting to establish themselves, and mutual respect as elites. So an amazing transformation starts to happen where you, as an elite blue, stop thinking of yourself as merely a blue or a really good blue. What you start thinking of yourself as is an elite or kind of an aristocratic blue or
Yeah.
a champion blue. And you start seeing your counterpart, that red, you're starting to see him as more like you than me, another blue, right? Why? Because he is another elite. See, you see yourself as an elite blue.
Yeah.
He's an elite
Right.
red. And more your identity is based upon your being an elite, not being a blue. And that goes to the point where at the highest levels, when you're looking to marry off your daughter or whatever, you're more ready to marry off your daughter to an elite red than a schlub like me, right, rank and file blue, right? So, and this is exactly what you get in aristocratic traditions. You also see this in sport. So, for instance, like Olympians are in sport elite Americans, right? And elite Koreans and elite Chinese and elite whatever, right? And so these elites see themselves as Americans, Chinese, whatever, sure, but they also see themselves as Olympians. And they have a lot more in common because, of the traditions of the Olympics that create these, rules of combat and these pageantry and all the various ways to show respect and so forth. They see themselves more as Olympians, really, than as, just representatives
Yeah.
of their country. And it's not uncommon for them even to say, if they feel wrongly passed over by their country and didn't get on an Olympic team for their country, to go try to be an Olympian for another country, you know, which from the rank and file point of view is a huge betrayal, right? But from
Yeah,
an
man.
American point of view, for an American to see an American athlete who's born in America, raised in America, competing for Jamaica, and you get these cases, right? Competing for
Yeah.
Jamaica, or her mom came from Korea, so she's competing for Korea because she couldn't make the American team. This is happening a lot, right? And 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 she doesn't even like maybe speak the language or anything, but she was good enough to get on that team, but not good enough to get on the American team. And now she's competing against her own country, right? And so from a nationalist
Yeah.
point of view, this is hugely betrayal. This is just huge betrayal, right? But the logic makes sense because these people are ultimately, right, seeing themselves as elite and invested in being elites more than being, and so they just see their side as really a
Yeah.
platform. So this is all about this is a way that, although it requires competition, you know, and it requires war in the case of warrior aristocrats or warrior aristocracies, it requires war, but it nonetheless has this weird way of moderating war because it's building ties of mutual respect
Yeah.
across the battlefield. And this will inevitably mean lots more courtesy, lots more respect, lots more seeing of the virtues of the people on the other side, humanizing the people on the other side, etc., at least among the elites, which can have a good effect of making the elites not want to just eradicate or ethnically cleanse or genocide out the other side, right? They see the
Yeah.
other side as led by people no worse than them, morally speaking, just on the other
Yeah.
side, which is a huge difference from where they started, right? Where they were just like
Yeah.
this evil orcs that just need to be absolutely eliminated.
Yeah,
You need war though for that, right? It's maintained by small scale skirmishes. The elites still need skirmishes, just like Olympians need to compete in order to justify their existence. The warrior aristocrat needs war to justify his existence.
yeah,
Nonetheless, that quote unquote war is going to be much more sport like, much more, have a lot more, uh, it's going to be quite moderated, have a lot more conventions and courtesies and so forth.
yeah. Right, but not necessarily because you have the Nazis who just from what I understand, it's not really about having honorable warfare. It's just the destruction of the world, kind of the complete, maybe not annihilation, but maybe it's like tyranny. It's just trying to, I don't
Yeah,
know. Like,
you'll get. I
what
mean,
do you
you'll get
think?
some.
Like, yeah,
Right,
Nazis,
you get. Well, I mean, of course, the quote
were they
unquote.
honorable? Right?
Yeah, the well, you have who was that? Who was that? Well, some were like the most famous case. No one, I don't think, denies this. The most famous case was, I forget the name of the German tank general in North Africa who Montgomery fought against, but he and Montgomery were the English tank, commander. They fought a very honorable kind of warfare in North Africa. And there are all
Okay.
these examples of, I forget what, but like prisoner exchanges and, good communication between the two. That was like, they were fighting a war that was like a World War One or previous type of warfare in North Africa.
Yeah.
I forget his name. Um, while others didn't. And so a lot of that has to do with, do they feel like they're fighting somebody on the other side who deserves to be treated honorably?
Yeah.
And so what stage of this development are they at? Are they just fighting people they feel to be cockroaches? Are they fighting uh, people they feel deeply wrong them in some dishonorable way and deserve eradication? Or are they fighting people they respect and have treated them with respect in the past? That's going to make all the differences in how you, right? So Israel is gloves off right now because they feel like um, Hamas what Hamas did in that attack was so deeply dishonorable,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they get none of the courtesies of war back.
Hmm. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, and so much more could be said. And in the paper that I deal with this question called Honor War Theory, I confront this issue of, well, how can two sides fight honorably when there's such a mismatch of capabilities? And I think there are answers to that question, but
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
because the Palestinian resistance is going to say, well, we can't have these sorts of honorable stand-up fights because of this disparity and
Yeah. Right.
in material, and so we have to use different strategies. And I do understand that, but I think they didn't use strategies that were within the bounds of honor for an overmatched group. I do
Hmm.
think there are other things you could do. Like, so
Yeah.
I am more, I can only get myself in trouble by talking here, but like, if you commit what would normally be terrorist acts or violations of Geneva War Conventions, but against military forces, like, say, posing as a civilian and blowing yourself up, but at a military barracks.
Yeah.
That I take to be morally superior to someone who blows themselves up or commits terrorism at a bus, or a school bus, or
Yeah. Yeah.
as we saw, just rape a bunch of women or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So That's a group that's trying their best to fight honorably, and I think that that should be noticed by the other side.
Sure, but is um is revenge honorable? So like so the Israel is like, okay, well this happened, and so now is it honorable to take revenge when an immoral action basically is done against you? Like I know the history is more complicated
Mhm.
than that, right? Because there's the origins of who has the right to live there and bigger issues, but I guess in general and in particular, is revenge honorable?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think revenge works so well in an agonism framework. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
suppose Ohio State and Michigan compete. They'll say, oh, they're, Ohio State is looking to avenge its loss last year, but that's not real vengeance, right? They're just trying to, you know,
yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
regain. They're just trying to regain their lost status from last year, or whatever. Um, and even if like Michigan cheated somehow in playing Ohio State, it wouldn't be Ohio State's job to really deliver any sort of punishment for that. It'd be like whoever is making sure that the competition is fair. It'd be their job, you know what I mean, to punish Michigan or something like that. Revenge is most at home in this other form of honor, which we would, that culture of honor type honor,
yeah.
right? And
Okay,
yes,
yeah, right.
that's a cornerstone of culture of honor type. These these long lasting, century long feuds between families and clans and ethnic groups. Yep, and this constant state of killing their kids when you have a chance and stealing their women when you
Yeah,
have a chance and so forth, and Hatfield and McCoy type stuff, which was a long-standing feud between two families in the South. Who, by the way, the big reason why probably we see more of this culture of honor stuff in the South is because the South was settled by um, people from the English periphery that were more honor, culture of honor guided, according to Nisbet and Cohen. So
sure.
yeah, um, revenge is absolutely necessary in those sorts of cultures.
Okay, interesting. So like is honor so honor has a masculine bent to it. So what is feminine honor then? Or is it just that women don't have
Yeah,
honor? They're
yeah,
just
good
not
question.
honorable, or does it not apply?
Yeah, good question.
And also women are not very competitive, right? And so it's like so there's no competitive prestige. So what about that?
All right. Yeah. So moving backwards, I think the informed social scientist is going to say women are highly competitive, but the
Okay.
way women compete is different than the way men compete. Men sort of compete, and I'm being absolutely mainstream here. I think when I say that the social scientist of this is going to say men compete in more overt ways, which are actually kind of ways that we've been talking about, right? Stand up fights or,
Yeah.
some sort of open violence. Women compete, they're going to say, in much more covert ways. They Okay, we're still learning a lot about this because it's so covert that science had a hard time figuring out female rankings. But um, they undermine each other in the background. They use gossip. They sabotage reputations. They pretend to be helpful when they're really sabotaging. They use moralizing. Um, they, do all this sort of stuff. It's very backbitey. It's a knife fight. It's a knife
Yeah.
fight, but not overt. And so, um, but what the seed of what you're saying, I do agree with in that the um, insofar as whether we're talking about culture of honor or agonistic modes of honor, it's much more upfront and and doesn't really, neither of those accommodates female ways of fighting. And so if you think like, well, females evolved to compete, didn't evolve to compete in those ways, then women are going to be less honor minded than men are. And I think there may be something to that. Much like men can be caring in their ways. Men do care. I do care about my children, but it just is a very different way than women care, much more indirect, by the way. Like, my sense of caring is, hey, create a good society or neighborhood for my children, provide money for my children. But I'm much more likely to watch my kid fall and scrape his knee and just sort of watch or not even know it happened. Right. And so men are often accused of being uncaring. Well, it's very maybe subtle ways of showing care or indirect ways of showing care, much like we might wrongly say that women aren't competitive just because it's a different, less overt way of being competitive. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so, but probably, I do believe that there is some continuum that we could probably see that women, when women are more care oriented and they moralize more in terms of care than men do, and harm reduction than men do, and men are going to moralize more. That means to say these rules of competition, men are more likely to see as morally relevant, not just good things to do or some weird thing people do or some weird social norm, but more likely to think they're actually morally required. And I actually started doing some science on that I had to abandon because I couldn't get the right sort of collaboration going. I'd like to pick it up, but I did I did create a bunch of questionnaire items to poll men and women about, care care questions and justice questions and honor questions, and trying to see both whether they agreed with the principles and whether or not they saw those principles as morally normative as opposed to just like sort of things people do. And so there's a lot of work to be done on that. But so it
Okay.
is plausible to me that men are more naturally agonistic, moralize that more than women. Yeah, that is plausible to me.
Right. And so, do, do you think that honor is like a reproductive strategy then? Because we have masculinity in a sense, we have winners, right? Women, high value. And so it's kind of like it sounds like a reproductive strategy for men to get women, but is it not necessarily so? Or what do you think?
Yeah, it's deep. So to some degree, almost, so many of the things that are innate or just kind of culturally common cross culturally common are going to have their ultimate explanation in mating strategies and and sexual differences. So it's plausible to me. I gave you this little story about the Reds and the Blues fighting, but that's not how honor really developed. I don't think. I think our instincts to be agonistic actually we've inherited these evolutionarily, just like we have our instincts towards care or cooperation. Um, and it probably does have its roots in male rough and tumble play. So
Yeah.
humans are a playful species, intelligent social species, intelligent mammals are highly playful species, and humans are one of the few species that play permanently, like at any age. We continue to be playful, not just as children. So there's some connection between, you know, intelligence and playfulness. And one type of play, most play is probably practice, right? Practice for
Yeah.
success in life at something you have to do. Um, so it's fun to climb trees because our ancestors found it useful to climb trees, and whatever. But it's fun to throw things because our ancestors benefited from throwing spears and rocks at prey or opponents. And so, but males especially like something. We've known this for a long time. Males like wrestling. Boys like what's called rough and tumble play. And they will do a lot of things that other animals do, like play down to each other and so forth. So it isn't the case that just the stronger boy just keeps beating the tar out of the smaller boy. They play down. So it's easy to imagine that as our species developed, we played a lot and didn't rank each other just in terms of strength in war and raw power against each other, but how well we performed in play. That got more and more structured and rule-based. And this was very useful because it's a great way of distinguishing talent for war or talent, maybe for work as well, gathering or whatever. It's a great way to guess at who's going to be more talented. And, just like UFC isn't real fighting, but it's a close proxy. It's the closest proxy and the closest safe proxy to real fighting that we have. So we may focus more and more because there aren't many occasions where you get to really fight. And there's a lot of chance that happens in fights and so forth. Whereas in sport, we could use that to kind of almost as a better judge of who's a better fighter than the real world, where a whole bunch of weird accidents happen. You're not near the fight, or you slip on a rock or whatever. So we started to have more and more play to tell who would be good at the stuff that really mattered. And then the play itself started really mattering. And so we started to really rank people according to who was the better player. And of course, once that ranking matters, you really care that people are following the rules for the ranking. So now honor develops, right? You're not a cheater, etc. You're not someone who cheats in these competitions. And what happened was that women watched these competitions, and parents of women watched these competitions. Parents of girls watched these competitions and used these competitions as ways to tell which men had better genetics than others. That's good because, you want your daughter to be with the males with the good genetics. So it did have huge mating impact. And even to this day, right? Even to this day, you have women who absolutely hang out outside of the locker rooms, right, of professional athletes. And it isn't just that they're trying to get money from these guys, because they don't hang out outside of the doors of the stock exchange company and be like, let me have sex with you. These groupies are groupies of athletes, and what they're sexually aroused by these men in a way that these women are ready to have sex without even financial commitment from these men, because they have distinguished themselves on the playground. And you see this all over in the animal world, where females will watch a bunch of males competing in the middle. This is sometimes called a lek. A lek is the Swedish word for playground, because it was so named by a great biologist whose name is a Swedish biologist whose name is escaping me right now, Linnaeus. And so he observed, various birds and stuff posing in front of each other like peacocks, etc. And, females watch this and they look to see who's the more magnificent male. Grouse do this have a really obvious one, sage grouse. And so females look to see which males compete, and they're sexually deer. There are cases of deer where they do this too. The males, compete. The females watch. The females have sex with the most successful males. and to get good genes. Yep.
Right, right. And so competitive games is like the spice of life. Like it brings us together sexually. Also, it brings spectacles and fans, and it unites us. It kind of it's it's the glue that kind of connects us together. But
It's
like
one of
is
them.
right, right,
I wouldn't say it's
exactly.
the only one. Of
Um,
course, there's family. There's a
right,
whole
right,
bunch of
right,
things, but
right,
it
right.
is it's a fun aspect of life, very meaningful. And I'm not talking about sports, but any sorts of competitions.
Yeah,
Beauty competitions, um, um, poetry competitions. The ancient Greeks had play competitions and so forth. Academia is an agonistic, realm as well. These things are
yeah, right.
uh, culturally important, fun, meaningful, and do come with reproductive um, benefits if you rise to the top of one of these agonistic competitions. Yeah.
Okay. Um, is honor relative? Because is it conservative? Like, is it does it have a conservative base, or is it like, or is it the basis of conservatism or liberalism? Because couldn't you say that a liberal, like the most liberal person, leftist person you could meet, is honorable in a sense, right? So like, I don't know, just however those characteristics are like, the more you are like that, the higher prestige you get. And so in a sense, it's kind of relative, right? Or agonistic um honor is kind of relative, right?
Yeah, there's going to be a certain relativity because the competitions could be over whatever, right? It could
Yeah,
be
right, exactly.
watermelon seed spitting, who's the furthest, spitter of watermelon seeds. It could be a competition over who is more woke, or who has earned more
Yeah,
woke points on the left or something like that. So yeah, you absolutely do have prestige competitions um, on the left, even if, by the way, they are against prestige, right? Because everyone's
yeah,
phony, right? But so you do. One reason to think there is something kind of conservative about honor is because traditional societies are not anti-hierarchy. They're not anti-rankist. Okay, they're not anti-ranking people and saying
yeah,
some people are better or worse. Liberal societies are liberal. You have professors that outright have books called like against rankism. Okay, so they're so hardcore egalitarian. They hate all competition and all rankings. This is unsustainable and it's silly because of course some are better than others, and of course the only way to fairly judge this is often by pitting them against each other in debate or some sort of contest. But whatever. So you do get this phenomenon on the left where they're sort of like dumb or awkward about rankings. And
yeah,
insofar as you're dumb, awkward, and have bad intuitions about competition, fair
yeah,
competition, and so forth, and understanding the importance of it, and when you're in one, then
yeah,
you're going to be kind of bad at honor, and maybe even more inclined to be dishonorable, right? Because you just don't get it. You don't have good
yeah,
intuitions for it. You haven't
yeah,
been raised for it well. Whereas people in traditional societies, they get it way quicker and understand when they're in one of these situations. Yeah, good
right.
question.
Yeah, so wouldn't you end up doing, like, one objection is wouldn't you end up doing really really quirky weird things in a honor culture? Like sometimes, like, you have a bunch of like these tribes who I think some women they they extend their necks by wearing rings, right? Or you might have like, I don't know, Romans eating hearts or something. So like you have these like really weird habits and super quirky, it seems, in a way that, like these habits in honor cultures, I think you can call it honor, right? Where you're
Mm-hmm,
trying
mm-hmm.
to get prestige. And so
Yeah,
like, isn't that a problem for honor cultures? Like, why would I join, right? It's like, yeah,
yeah. Um, you have this tribe in Ethiopia where the men compete over who could get fatter. So they just like eat all this milk and just sit around all day long to have this competition of who's fatter
Yeah.
by this certain season. And then you have some others that I think the Watutsi or whatever, where they jump real high, and they try to see who could jump higher in place.
Yeah.
And it's just, and we have our silly ball sports that look absolutely incomprehensible from the outside world and so forth, right? So we have our own too.
Yeah.
So why would you do it? Well, because it's fun. It's
Yeah.
a way to compete. The women care about it, so it has sexual importance, and so that's why you would try to in, try to find some hierarchy to compete in. I think in the manosphere, when you look at like people, giving young men advice about how to get girls, right? One of the things they'll say is, be social, be in groups, but also find some outlet where you can distinguish yourself. And basically what they're saying is find some outlet where there's competitions and
Yeah.
contests so
Okay.
that you think you can excel in, so you could
Yeah.
have some high status. At least you could take the girl and show her that you're better than other men at something. That's really important, right? She needs to be able to see that you're better than other men at something. Because if you're not doing that, you're not showing all the sorts of virtues that you need to be good at rising in a hierarchy, which is like self-restraint, dedication, and a sense of fair play, social skills, etc. Because you have to do all that if you're going to be allowed to compete in that competition, right? The other men have to be okay with you hanging around them and competing with them and so forth. But you also are demonstrating genetic quality, right? Because she has to mix her genes with you. Women, of course, because of parental investment theory, we know that women have to be the choosy sex, right? So women can only have so many children. Men can have unlimited numbers of children. So men are not picky when it comes to who they have sex with. All they need to have sex with
Mm.
is a young woman. But women do have to be picky about who they have sex with. They don't want. They're only going to mix their genes so many times, right? A very finite number of times, and so they want to mix it with someone with the best genes. And so you need to show that you're better than other men at something to make her want to have sex with you.
Okay.
So those are good reasons to enter little agonistic realms and honor competitions. What could be a better reason than
Yeah.
that?
Right. Um, can you speak a little bit more about how liberalism or institutions or statism, authoritarianism, dislikes honor? Because I think you've written before that honorable people had this issue of potentially has this issue of being
Yep.
ungovernable, and the issue of upstartism, which is that they might just, if you're seeking prestige, then you might just take over the world, or the land or whatever. And also they're super, I guess it's like a culture of honor thingy where it's like they just they're super independent, and they're not gonna just do what you want, right? Or and so that's problematic for liberal institutions, for states, because you can't control them.
That's a great question, and what you're saying is really kind of based upon my summaries of the person who first and best rolled out this idea, this dynamic between honor and liberalism. Uh, a historian at Brown at the time, I don't know if she's still there, called Sharon Krause, and she wrote this excellent book called Liberalism with Honor. And what Krause was trying to do, which is really great, because I mean, in one sense, she's trying to develop a sense of an understanding of honor when no one really was doing that. I mean, we didn't have that much work on that at the time, but she makes this argument that although in some sense liberalism is in tension with honor, because liberalism is about cooperation, where honor is in some sense conflict oriented. Liberalism is egalitarian, where honor is typically hierarchical, rankist.
Yeah.
Um, that that but nonetheless she thinks that somehow honor is important to preserving liberalism. So how could that possibly work? And if I recall, what her view is that um, another and more deadly enemy of liberalism is authoritarianism, which obviously is rankist, but
Yeah.
but unlike a more honor tradition, it will force people to live in ways that they maybe don't want to live. So there are these episodes where you get people who are faced with authoritarianism and refuse to comply, and that's important for breaking the control that the authoritarian system has. So she has this example of this aristocrat during I don't know when this was, the 30 Years' War or whatever, that was sent by the French king to go, just go kill a bunch of Huguenots, just so do some religious cleansing or something. I'm butchering this case, but and the French nobleman who doesn't really like the prospect of just mowing a bunch of heretics or whatever down, who are defenseless. He said, I came and I found only good citizens and no enemies or something like that. And so he just refused the order of the king, because the warrior aristocrat again wants to kind of fight equals, not just like kill or slaughter. And so and likewise she also likes the main example. One of her main examples is Martin Luther King. So there are these people who, because of their sense of self-worth, they just refuse to bow under any threat. You could threaten to kill them, you could threaten to gulag them or whatever, but they just won't back down because they have this toughness that really is more at home in the world of honor and nurtured more in an honor culture than in a liberal one. So you need to, what she wants is like this like liberalism that's tough. All right. She wants a type of citizenry that has a high regard for themselves and their dignity, and isn't willing to be cowed, as Hobbes would like to have us cowed by authority. And so and so yeah, it's a very interesting idea. So yeah, people who have this very developed sense of dignity and so forth, they are hard to intimidate and control. And there's a type of authoritarianism that is basically little more than bullying. And if we could nurture in a populace this sort of pluck to always stand up to bullies, it just makes it harder for the bullies to win.
Right. And so honor could actually flourish in a liberal society, like even promote liberal values,
I don't know about
especially
that.
if
Yeah, that's a tough
okay,
question.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
liberalism may
It's
flourish if you have honorable people, but the question is, does liberalism do a good job at creating honorable people?
Oh,
Because what we
I
have
see what
right
you
now
mean.
is
Okay.
is a culture that seems to be trying to beat the spiritedness out of boys all the time, right? So I mean, what we have now is a culture that sees two boys fighting, two fifth graders fighting, and they get punished, they get told that they're bad, they get or these kids have a lot of high spirits and we're putting them on ADD drugs, or trying to make them nice and play nice and whatever, and trying to eradicate competition, and right, we're trying to do all the things. Our elementary schools are doing and high schools are doing everything they can do to basically beat out that thumotic element. And well, you could see it if you think what it is to be moral is to reduce harm and to be cooperative. Then yeah, any sort of fighting and competition and high spiritedness is antithetical to that. And so what they're doing is they're at war with important parts of masculinity. And as Krauss would note, parts of masculinity that come in very handy when you're trying to fight authoritarians. And so and then and so what these school teachers are doing is creating a bunch of men who, when these school teachers are attacked on a subway by some sort of schizophrenic nutcase, all the men are like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I don't know how to fight. I don't know what to do. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to, I could get hurt, and, I'm going to try to talk through this or whatever, right? And that,
Yeah.
and then suddenly they're like, where are the men at? Well, it's like you guys eradicated them. You
Yeah.
eradicated this. Or who's going to fight again?
Right.
If if we actually do have someone who tries to be a tyrant, they're going to be the first ones to call for someone to resist the tyranny or something, and it's not going to be
Yeah.
wearing pussy hats and going on a march. It's going to take
Yeah.
guys who are highly agentive and tough, and they're going to suddenly look for guys that they did everything to keep from
Banished.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's so yes, I think Krauss would say, or I would at least say, that liberalism works better with a healthy dose. Liberalism is going to be more sustainable with a healthy dose of those sorts of anti-liberal impulses. But um, and because of that, liberalism has to be careful not to be too um, all encompassing, right?
Yeah.
It
Right.
has to allow spaces, that those anti-liberal spaces to exist, so that those
Right.
resources are there when a liberal society needs them.
Okay. And liberal societies don't they don't champion, well, there's no champions, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I think you talked about civic honor. Like, you can't have these Rushmore people anymore. You can't have people to, like, look up to. You base, like, in a liberal society, I think you argue that um you basically have to know the goodness and the badness of a person, and so there aren't really these, like, and so everybody is, like, good and bad, and so now you can't have
Oh, I see what
these
you're saying.
champions of the West, or these, like, these heroes anymore, because
Yeah, yeah,
in an egalitarian society, you have to know the truth
yeah, yeah.
about everything,
Oh,
and
yeah,
so the heroes fade pretty
yeah,
much.
exactly. So textbook definitions of liberalism will often note that liberalism is committed to liberty and maximum
Yeah.
liberty, individual liberties. It's about individualism, it's about individual liberties, it's about equal individual liberties, but it also has these other connotations for some authors, like a commitment to rationality and truth.
Yeah.
And that means that you see, partially because of that and also partially because of their knee-jerk egalitarianism, they are always knocking down heroes, right? They're always trying to debunk heroes. They're always trying to bring people down a peg, whatever. You're always writing your revisionary history. Oh, Teddy Roosevelt wasn't that great. George Washington really wasn't that great, et cetera, right? And, a lot of that comes from, you don't have to be much of a Nietzschean to notice that a lot of that comes from a small heartedness that doesn't like that some people are better than you. And so you try to bring other people down. But part of it comes from just their egalitarian impulses. Okay. Which I suppose you could have without Nietzschean resentment or whatever. Okay. So because of that, you can't have these culture heroes. That's bad for a culture in a lot of ways. Um, it's very valuable to have cultural ideals for the kids to aspire to live up to. It is buoying to children to feel like they are descended from great men who are larger than life. It makes them feel better and like they are capable of great things. And also, it is very important to teach young children that if they make great sacrifices for the community, that they will be honored by the community for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's a very important trade-off. And they may not be thinking about children, but it's a huge trade-off genetically. Like you could see this on evolutionary level. So for instance, it may be crazy for it's crazy for you to die in war for reproductively, right? But say you have a few kids already and you know that, or if you subconsciously know that if you die in war, you're going to be this great hero and your kids are going to be elevated because of that and be super respected in the community because of that and have a bunch of advantages. Maybe they go to school for free, maybe whatever, right? They're going to have a bunch of advantages that raise their reproductive potential hugely, right? So you would get better grandkids and more grandkids. Then it actually
Yeah. Yeah.
is more, it isn't reproductively crazy for you to sacrifice yourself in battle. So it is very important for us to immortalize and elevate to mythic proportions culture heroes. And,
Yeah.
and liberalism tends to work against that. It's a very important
Sure.
it's a very important social trade-off. And if you don't have that, if you eradicate honor, then you're undermining one of the big motives people have to be pro-social and to make sacrifices for the collective.
Sure. And but I suppose a liberal might say, you're kind of appealing to higher authorities, like you're making these people into celebrities, and you are ignoring their bad habits, right? And so, isn't that a problem? You're basically just saying he's a celebrity, and he may do bad things. He may have done bad things, but we'll just ignore it,
Yep.
and that sounds problematic.
Well, I want to hear why it's problematic, but the benefit of it is, and I like the word celebrity. Like Taylor Swift is a celebrity. She can't tell me what to do, right? Right? It's high
Yeah.
status, zero authority, right? So
Yeah.
this is a wonderful thing. It's great to have people who can achieve think I mean if I want not to be controlled, I want I would rather have people then sacrifice for me by my just giving them honor than than sacrificing for me in the shape of them saying, well, I know what's better for you, so I'm going to force you to do it. So I give them power, right? So
Yeah.
so what we risk doing is if we don't give the great glory, if we don't give them celebrity, if we don't give them fame, the great will either not give us anything, will not do anything for the collective, or will think that the only way they could help the collective is by forcing them to do something. And that's scary because, now they're telling us what to do. So now what a lot of liberals like to do, and you'll see this a lot if you talk to Europeans. Europeans hate billionaires, and because they're like more into socialism. And so they hate even billionaire donors. So if you're like, oh, well, these billionaires are giving billions of dollars to good causes, they'll say things like, they'll say this all the time. They shouldn't have that much money in the first place. What should be happening is the government takes that money and then distributes it according to the way that, a democratically elected system decides. They don't want them having that much power to throw around. I find that to be, unjust on a lot of levels, right? But the trade-off, and the billionaires will just flee anyway, or not do the work that made them the billionaires, and that's why socialistic countries tend to be poorer and lose their rich and most ambitious people. I don't mind trading praise and glory and honor for material help, but they really do. It irks them. Like you'll see a lot, like with a rich donor who wants to donate a lot of money, but they want the name on the building. You know what I mean? You'll see this. Yeah. And the professor's just, what? Just some rich guy comes in and gives me, and now it's all named, and I have to put this on my letterhead and blah, 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 right? Because they're arrogant assholes for the most part who think like they hate the fact that they have to give honor to someone who's rich, who they look down on. Why? Because they're high on their own supply. They're very interested in their own honor game, which is academics. And they don't respect that guy's honor game, which was making money, maybe, right? So, and they hate the inegalitarian nature of it, and they think it's, kind of boastful or whatever. But I have no problem with it. I love rich people giving money away. I love it. And I'm happy, to good causes. And I'm ready to line up to give them praise for doing that when they could have bought another yacht or something like that,
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have a culture like that. Now, what we're doing now, where we're taking down monuments to culture heroes, is just sending a horrific message, and renaming buildings and so forth is sending this horrific message that you will be scrutinized and your history will be dredged up, and every bad thing you did will be talked about, and people who are far lesser, or, don't hold a candle to you, will be weighing you in their moral balances 100 years later. If you're a presently rich person, why would you sacrifice for an institution who is going to do that to you in the not too distant future? You're not. You may as well just make money and be like in a low trust society like India or somewhere in Africa, and just build your massive compound and not give back to the community, because it's not going to pay you any social dividends to do so.
Yeah, right. So is liberalism and conservatism like two separate tribes then? Because they tear down your monuments and then they put up their own, people.
Oh no,
and so it's kind of like
it is. It's really not. Right. It ends up
right?
becoming just as tribal. I mean, so these same people that are like tearing down, these same people who are like tearing down monuments to Confederates will put up a monument to George Floyd. They take down the monuments of the criminal of the Confederate because they're like, well, he's a bad person, and then they'll put up a monument to George Floyd, who was a bad person.
Yeah,
Who's, I
right.
mean, like a
And
literal
also, yeah,
felon who um, was an armed home invader. But they don't apply those standards to them, right? It's just patently
yeah,
hypocritical.
right. Plus, liberals seem pretty bonded in a liberal, society. Like they have their own values, and so they seem pretty bonded in their own way. And so it's like seems like a different tribe, honestly. Um,
Yeah, do you mean like liberals in the sense of progressives or leftists or something?
yeah, progressives, yep, leftist,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We are a politically tribalized society.
yeah. Do you think that honor solves the world's issues? I think you kind of hinted at it, but you think like there's a bunch of issues in the world, like mental illnesses, hedonism, people just have sex, do drugs, party. That's it, right? Just a bunch of issues in the world. What does honor solve? I mean, maybe it tightens our bonds, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, depending on what type of honor you're talking about, it solves some problems, and it comes
The
with
incel problem,
it
maybe?
causes other problems. No, I wouldn't say it solves the incel problem. Although, um, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say that, but um, it solves. It is the if you're talking about agonism, it is the ethic of contest between
Yep.
respectable equals, and there are places for that, and it's important, and it builds important character and traits and virtues that are lacking. So it like this is why athletes are so great. Like like I teach some athletes in our from our sport management major. They have to take my professional ethics class, and these are like the least academically interested kids that I teach, but they are also by far the most mentally healthy kids. All right.
Mm.
Because these kids have grown up playing sports, and they eat better, they exercise more, they but they have developed a bunch of great virtues that sport teaches, and sportsmanship is basically agonism, right? But as applied to sport, and and it's no surprise that kids who are athletes on average out earn those who are not. Right? They know how to work on a team. They know how to play fair. They know how to give credit. They know how to encourage. They have resilience and toughness. They have ambition. They fight through difficulty and grit, and they have all these great virtues. And um, and for whatever reason, we see like progressives being kind of against those virtues. They celebrate weakness. They
Right.
celebrate vulnerability. They celebrate victimhood. They are anti-conflict, anti-stress. They view these things as things to be avoided instead of things to be, they view stress as something to be avoided, competition as something to be avoided, whereas the the athletes are looking at these things as to be sought out, and to grow from. So, you know, and so their mental health is worse, and
Right.
they're just ineffectual people. So yeah, I think agonism and creating healthy competition is and teaching people about how to navigate morally these forms of competition would really go some way to helping the mental health crisis and the a crisis in virtue that we see among the young.
Yeah. What about civil discourse? Because it seems like the left and the right refuse to talk to each other. I mean, there's like a intellectual fragility, right? Where it's like
Yeah, fragility,
they just don't respect you,
and
right?
also purity. So like another ethic
Parity.
that is in the human, that it's knocking about the human subconscious, is this sort of purity ethic that says, if you're pure, you should only deal with other pure people, and
Oh, really?
yeah, and if you're an evil person, I can't talk to you or
Yeah.
touch you, because then you're
Yeah.
evil, like
Okay.
corrupt me, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of people fall into this form of thinking, and it really hurts civil discourse, because they just, to be seen talking with a wrong thinker or someone in the other political, with the other on the other political side, um,
Yeah.
dirties you, and so that's just
That makes sense.
exactly not how the agonist is going to approach it, right?
Yeah.
The agonist is going to, hey, let's have a debate, right? The agonist is going to say,
Yeah.
let's,
Yeah.
I want to engage you. I feel like I could champion my side, and you seem like a champion of
Yeah.
your
Right.
side, so let's
Right.
have a debate about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's like,
Yeah.
the agonist is
May the best
engagement.
win, pretty
Yeah,
much.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it could be a very good, very good for civil discourse in that way, as long as you're
Sure.
willing
Sure.
to understand civil discourse as including debate. There are other nice things that an agonistic spirit brings to civil discourse, which are like that people pick up on their own, even if they're not taught about it. Like, kids just on social media learned to talk about punching down on their own, but that idea of punching down is exactly, one of the principles of agonistic honor that I have talked about in my writing, right? You don't tack
Yep.
downwards, you tack upwards. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
they
Yep.
pick that up, right? And but that's an agonistic idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Okay.
think that
People should be more
being
agonistic and,
courteous to your
right.
interlocutor if you're having a
Yeah.
debate, just
Right.
like warrior aristocrats would be courteous
They
to each
won't even
other
listen
on
to
the
you, right?
battlefield, right? Yeah. So you don't interrupt them, you let them have their 5 minutes, you have your 5 minutes. You don't insult them, you don't assume that they have bad motives. All that's warrior aristocratic, right? Where you say
Yeah. Right.
to you say to your opponent on the other side, look, you and I have different goals, but I'm not morally better than you, I'm just on this side.
Yeah.
And that's not how they operate, right? The
Yeah.
non-agonist is like, you're evil, I'm good, why should I give you any quarter, I'm here to win, you know I want to eradicate
Yeah.
you and your kind from the face of the earth. That's how they fight.
Yeah.
And that's total war, and that leads to more vicious types of fighting. And
Right.
yet,
Um. Yeah.
that's how our kids are being taught to engage in, like our student newspaper. Well, it increasingly has students writing opinion columns with anonymous ones, right? It's almost getting to a
Yeah.
point where the entire school newspaper is written anonymously. And it's like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
they'll talk about you by
Yeah. Yeah.
name, but they won't ever say who they are, right? This
Yeah.
this absolute non-accountability for what I have to say. Why? Because
Yeah.
I'm vulnerable and you're not vulnerable, whatever, because you're a professor or whatever, but I'm vulnerable, so I get, and it's
Yeah.
cowardice, right? It's cowardice, and it's
Yeah.
actually bullying, a type of cowardly bullying. um
Yeah.
and quite uncivil discourse.
Right.
So, like I
Um.
had a student that last year who was mad that I shared this piece of scholarship, because she didn't like the politics of it or whatever. And she just
Right.
kept attacking me on the newspaper and I attacked back and so forth. And I said, look, let's have a Zoom meeting. You can disguise your voice. You can, you know, keep your camera off, but I will record it and put it out, and we'll have this conversation out.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
not even that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
this they have so eradicated any sort of courageous and open engagement, which are paradigmatic agonistic virtues from these kids, that they are unable to engage in anything that I would call civil discourse.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's kind of sad. It seems kind of sad. It's just people they don't want to be wrong. I don't know. It's just, they don't want to feel hurt. Um, but how? I do have
That's
this
fine, but they
expert
will hurt
question. Yeah.
you, but they will go after you. That's the truth.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
Exactly.
like they're just, oh man,
Right.
this is a rough and tumble game, I better not enter it. No, they want to talk smack and criticize you and show off in their again with their friends about how brave and courageous they are in speaking truth to power or whatever bullshit, but
Hmm.
they won't engage. Even when every
Right. Okay.
accommodation is made to and every assurance is given that they're not going to get any harm from it, right? Because so it is truly, as others have called it, a type of cry bullying. Not cry babying, but cry
Hmm.
bullying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I interrupted you. Sorry.
And is there like, yeah, no, is there like a racial aspect to this? Because like honor, I've only ever seen honor within racial lines in a sense, right? So like I'm Hmong, and so there's a lot of honor there, respect. I can understand Muslims or Palestinians kind of like having their own honor, like Black Americans having their own sort of honor. I don't know, maybe honor code, like honor exists there, but like in a multiracial society, it seems like it's harder because let's say it's agonistic honor, like you're better than me at this, but then some people might just call you, they might call it a race, like call you racist or something, because there's always this race based element to this, or to liberal societies, I guess, or leftist societies where, or multiracial societies where I, I guess I've just never seen honor present in non, single race tribes, I guess.
Very, very interesting question. Yeah. I think. I think you can see it obviously in like athletics, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, so what's going on? I would say the problem is that agonism requires kind of an agreed upon sense of the rules of the contest.
Yeah.
And that requires a, a type of a background assumptions or whatever, right? So, I mean, if we have two very different cultures, you and I, we're going to have to be much more deliberate about what the rules are of this, what's within the rules and what's outside of the rules, and how we compete.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that's really what's going on. Is just there's just not enough cultural continuity for us on for if insofar as what you're saying is true. I would say the explanation is
It
that
seems like it,
there's not
right?
enough cultural continuity between different racial groups so that where they're operating with the same sense of what the rules are. And it's not that one group has a better
Okay.
set of rules than other. They're just different sets of rules, like two different, like one side is trying to do Greco-Roman wrestling and one side is trying to do freestyle
Yeah.
wrestling. It's not like freestyle wrestling rules are better than Greco-Roman. They're just different rules. But one side is doing stuff the other side thinks is dishonorable, right? Both sides think,
Yeah.
and it's not because it is, it's just because they have different conventions about how to engage in these contests. And that's one thing that sport does great, right? Because sport makes very clear what the rules are. And then, for a few years when you're in elementary school and high school, you learn the unspoken rules, and then people kind of agree within that. Although it's still not
Yeah.
perfect. I mean, you will see differences. Like, I can't help but notice that, like, what how white football players celebrate in the end zone looks different than how black players celebrate in the end zone. So you do get some differences even from people who have been playing that damn game from the time they were 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
So it is fascinating how that happens, but yeah. So one of the problems that you get is, one of the things that you have to develop if you want to develop honor across races or honor across groups is just a lot of
Yeah.
communication about what the rules are.
Okay. Sure. I mean, I guess I have like a few more questions, but I've been kind of, the questions are kind of random in a sense, um, but this one is: you think animals have honor? Like, there's a basis for animals to have some sense of honor, I guess. Like, I think you give the examples of deers and grouse. I think grouse. So like, yeah. So what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that you see proto honor, proto agonism in animals, just as you see proto justice in animals, and we certainly see a lot of care behavior in animals, right? I mean, it'd be crazy to say that, like, humans developed a concern for the weak and their children when you see so
Yeah.
many animals sacrificed for their children, right? So their offspring. So and likewise, you on cooperation, you see animals cooperating and punishing defectors and so forth. You see precursors of agonism in animals, and a great example, some of the best examples are animals where the males are selected merely for their good genes, not because of resources they provide. And so what nature does is sort of oftentimes have those males compete against each other. So you see this with bucks. All right. So
Yeah.
here's what you don't see among bucks: two bucks becoming buddies and fucking up all the other single bucks around, right? So, like, I have this buddy buck, and you and I start locking horns, and then my buddy buck just nails you in the side and rips you open with
Yeah.
his horns.
Right.
You don't see that.
Yeah.
Why don't you see
That's
that?
cheating, pretty much.
Well, and it's not because they're like, oh, that wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be like a good buck boy scout. It's not like they're thinking that, right? They did not evolve to even do that behavior, and plausibly they didn't evolve to do that behavior because that type of behavior would not be rewarded by the females. So you know so
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by these examples in nature of one-on-one male combat. Now, you do see that sometimes also in, like, elephant seals, but the males are kind of doing it to get the best beaches, and the best beaches are useful to the cows because it's
Yeah.
easier to get birth there, or safer from predators, or better, closer to food sources. But I'm really fascinated by, I think the best place to look for proto agonism, because it's very interesting. So, like, with deer, you'll see they'll go through this, the bucks, they go through this process where they walk towards each other and they're sizing themselves up, and then they do something called parallel walking. And if you and I
Yeah.
parallel walk, we're $2 and we parallel walk, and I see you're a lot bigger than me, I just leave. Or if we parallel walk and you see I'm a lot bigger than you just leave. But if we see we're roughly the same, then we engage, right? Well, that's exactly what an
Yeah.
agonist would say, right? It's a system of which you're evenly matching opponents, right? Because there are these rankings of the bucks, and they've even done science where they've been like, they'll rank the bucks 1 through 6 in terms of the rank, and they find that
Yeah.
the buck who's like ranked number 6 will initiate combat not even with number 5 but with number 4, because it wouldn't be a noticeable enough payoff if he won by beating 5. He needs to beat 4, but 3 is way too big for him, or powerful, or dominant, or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's exactly the sort of things that you know
Yeah.
agonism calls for with humans. I find it absolutely fascinating.
Right.
And it makes
And
it's
you
the
also think
logic.
that
The logic has to be that way, right? You have
yeah.
to, if
Right.
you're a female looking for who's the best, you need to have some sort of competition, and you need that competition to be fair. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, which is different from authoritarianism or egalitarianism systems where
It's
I
different
guess
than
it's like
egalitarianism because you have
yeah.
ranks. And that's why
Yep.
egalitarianism will never work. I mean, if we're completely honest, just egalitarianism is just absolutely not worth talking about, because women will always look for some reason to have sex with one man as opposed to another, right? They need to be looking for
Yeah.
genetic quality, and or better provisioning or protection or whatever. So women are going to be hypergamous, and and you can't mesmerize men into trying to set up egalitarian systems when that is not to their reproductive advantage, because some men are
Yeah.
going to be like, well, wait a minute, this is just costing me mates, because she's only, so they're so you're
Okay.
never going to have the egalitarianism, and it is opposed to the liberalism in the sense that it is conflict driven as opposed to cooperation driven.
Right. Right. Sure. Last question. So if I lost my honor, let's say I cheated, how do I regain my honor? Maybe you don't exile me yet, and I want to regain my honor. How would I do that?
Right, so it's good you said.
Or I disrespected you,
Mhm,
right?
mhm. Yeah, so it's good. Well, those are two different things, but yeah, the fact that you disrespected me does not mean I lost my honor yet, um, because the question is, have I responded in the right way? I haven't done anything dishonorable just
Okay.
because you disrespected
Oh,
me,
okay.
right? Now, if you disrespect me and I don't do anything about it, or and usually it's if my friends don't do anything about it. It depends. If you're of a
Yeah.
similar rank to me and you disrespect me, it's something that I have to handle. If you're of a low
Yeah.
rank and you disrespect me, then or if you're a much higher rank, then someone else needs to step in. But let's set that to the side. Let's say I
Yeah.
do
Sure.
something dishonorable, and it's good that you said exile, because you get that, like, the punishment for dishonor is not like the punishment in a justice world, because dishonor only hurts me. It's not right. It's not like I stole anything from you or hurt you. And that's why it's not a punishment culture in the sense of imposing harm, in the sense of like materially hurting me or something like that. You can, so I do something dishonorable. You do you exile me? Well, actually, exile is more of a thing that they do in a purity culture, right? So if I do something
Okay. Yeah.
impure,
Yeah.
you need to get me out like I'm an infectious agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, in honor culture, I'm not even impure. I have just dishonored myself.
Shameful,
What?
maybe. shameful,
Yeah,
maybe
I've
like
done
I
something
shame you
I've done
for.
something deserving of shame. In honor culture, what you're going to do is like, you'll strip me of my insignia. What really happens is I could be around. What you do is you just ghost me. What you do is you ghost me,
Okay, okay,
right? You just
okay,
act like I'm a non-person, okay?
okay,
And that's brutal, but that's all you need to do in honor culture. If I okay, how do I get that back? And I think we know deep down, like, because it's in a lot of movies about what you do when you have done something dishonorable. What you have to do is you go through a period of shame and rebuilding, and
yeah,
you outperform at whatever thing caused you to dishonor yourself in the first place. So suppose that I got caught for plagiarism, or suppose that I
yeah,
got caught for like making up some fake data, and I got a whole bunch of academic accolades for this amazing work, but it turns out I had faked my data. Now in academia, that's paradigmatically dishonorable, right? Because I cheated to get status. All right, I cheated to get status. And so I lose my tenure or whatever, or maybe I have good tenure, but they just don't invite me to conferences anymore, and my reputation is shit. And
yeah,
no
right,
grad
right,
students will work with me, whatever. What do I do to recover that?
yeah,
Well, I may never recover, but if my best chance at recovery would be what? Obviously, doing some true, genuine science that was really, really good. And if I do that
okay,
and like show it to the world, and they're like, God damn, okay, yeah, you were dishonorable there, but you have shown that indeed you can be that guy that you claimed to be or should have been.
yeah,
Okay. Or if I was a coward on the battlefield, and I was, this is more common, of course, right? In our evolutionary history, I showed some cowardice in the battlefield, and I'm being ghosted back at the village because I showed cowardice. Well, if I'm going to be able to show my face anymore, if I'm going to be able to regain my status, or any sort of status whatsoever in the honor group, I have to show a superabundance of wild suicidal courage
hmm.
when the next
Yeah,
boar
yeah,
hunt happens, or if we're attacked. And oh, this is, by the way, a very common thing in movies, right? the
yeah,
the protagonist shows some cowardice, or is thought to have been cowardly in battle,
yeah,
and is suffering from dishonor, and then the tribe is
yeah,
attacked, right? And then he
yeah,
comes in guns blazing or whatever, and he does some like crazy courageous whatever exploits to save the group,
yeah,
right? And then they're like, okay, you were a good one after all, we were wrong about you, or you're
right,
redeemed, right? So
okay,
um yeah, you have to show a superabundance of whatever defect it was that caused you to dishonor yourself.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. I guess I was thinking about like dishonoring your family name or something. Like I messed up. I was dishonorable, and now in like a family setting, and now it's like you know, I don't know. It's like we don't have to talk about that. It is getting late. That was basically the final question. Yeah, thank you, Professor, for coming on. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, but I thank you for inviting me to this great talk. It's been you asked excellent questions that really, it seemed like every question,
Super random. Yeah.
no, every question really pushes me, really makes me wish I was still working on this. It makes me wish that like
Mm.
100 ethicists were
Oh, you
working on
stopped?
honor. Yeah, I moved on to other topics. And
Okay.
um, but there's we haven't even barely scratched the surface of honor ethics. And I think if any student stumbles upon this, when you post this video, I hope you put all these tags in, and because I hope students of honor come upon this podcast and realize that you've just asked a bunch of questions, each of which would make fantastic academic essays. Um, and there should be whole, debates and literatures about each one of these questions. They're absolutely fascinating. There's just so
All
few
right.
people
Thank you,
working on
Professor.
honor. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Suki.
Yeah.
Take care and good luck
Yeah.
with the
Thank
podcast.
you.
All right. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.